Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the InnerViews. In today's video, we're going to take a look at Granit Xhaka and Dani Ceballos and break down how they've formed what appears to be Mikel Arteta's first choice midfield in Arsenal's 3-4-1-2. When we break it all down and look at Arsenal's 3-4-1-2, what should be said here is that going forward, most sides playing in a three-man backline want to have five players pushing forward, and ultimately it forms them into a 3-2-5. So you have the wing backs pushing forward, you have the two attacking players pushing forward, and then the central player that's just in behind them also joining the attack. That would leave Granit Xhaka and Dani Ceballos in those deeper positions, looking to protect the back three, especially if balls are played into the channels in transition. So as we head into this analysis, we're going to break down why they're so effective defensively, what they offer going forward, and what's the issue in this Arsenal side that prevents those two players from getting the recognition that they deserve. Since the Premier League restart, Arsenal have played some of the top sides in the league, and what you've seen is that in those games they've dropped off a bit deeper, they've looked to press from the front, and then they've had Xhaka and Ceballos play a key role in ensuring that the opposing side's midfields can't dictate the tempo of the game. Arsenal were able to avenge their initial loss to Manchester City in the FA Cup, and what you ended up seeing here was that Ceballos and Xhaka, specifically in that opening half, neutralized the threat of Kevin De Bruyne and David Silva. When you look at that midfield zone, it was Lacazette sitting on Gundogan, and then you had Xhaka stepping into the path of De Bruyne, and then you had Ceballos sitting a bit deeper, tracking the movement of David Silva. And even at times when he lost the movement of David Silva in those deeper positions, what you ended up seeing was that Mustafi picked up Silva, and then you had Dani Ceballos shifting out into the path of Raheem Sterling to ensure that Arsenal maintained their balance and shape without the ball. So as you could see, Xhaka's role was to press higher to ensure that De Bruyne couldn't dictate the tempo from deeper positions, and Ceballos did a very good job of protecting the back three and ensuring that David Silva couldn't influence the game between the lines. There were two examples in particular that did come to mind. One ended up seeing Silva drop deeper into his own half to get on the ball, splitting Pepe and Lacazette, and finding Gabriel Jesus dropping off David Luiz, but Ceballos shifted across to ensure that Arsenal won the ball. And shortly after that, you end up seeing Laporte stepping into the Arsenal half to split Ceballos and Pepe for Sterling dropping off of Bellerin. But when Sterling receives that ball, Ceballos dropping off a bit deeper to apply pressure with Mustafi, and once again, Arsenal are able to win possession. When we shift to the game against Leicester City, Leicester adopted a 3-4-1-2 as well, but the difference here was that we ended up seeing Ayoze Perez play a key role, as he often looked to shift into that midfield zone to the right of Ceballos to get on the ball. What you ended up seeing was that Saka would drop off Soyuncu and look to block off the passing lane into Tielemans, and that's when you would have Ceballos drifting out into the path of Ayoze Perez, and then have Xhaka shift across the pitch if need be to close down Tielemans as well. For the most part, we did have Xhaka sticking towards Ndidi in those situations, but there were equally times where you had Saka dropping off to help out Ceballos against Ayoze Perez, or even times where Xhaka just ignored Ndidi, pushed over into that path near Tielemans, or sometimes beyond Tielemans, and they looked to swarm that left side of that pitch to ensure that Tielemans and Ayoze Perez couldn't get on the ball. Meanwhile, Ceballos also did a good job of covering for Xhaka. If Xhaka was bypassed, there was a time where you had Ceballos dropping off to dispossess Albrighton at the edge of the box, and there was occasion where both Ceballos and Xhaka did dispossess Ayoze Perez as he was looking to break into the final third. Likewise, there was also an offensive side to Dani Ceballos' game, as he was able to evade challenges when Leicester City did look to press, and it was Ceballos who was involved in the build-up to Arsenal's opening goal, as he evaded pressure from Tielemans and ended up splitting Soyuncu and Evans to find Saka breaking in behind. The game against Wolves did witness a more detailed plan from Nuno Espirito Santo. Wolves did position themselves in a 3-5-2, and what we ended up seeing was that Jimenez and Traore dropped off deeper to block off the passing lane into Ceballos, and then what you ended up seeing being formed was a pentagonal midfield, because you had Ruben Neves at the base. You had then Donker sitting in the path of Xhaka, and Moutinho was also narrow. So you have 5 Wolves players blocking off the passing lane into Dani Ceballos and Granit Xhaka, and that ultimately forced Arsenal to play long and play out into the wider areas. But what you can say is that although Xhaka and Ceballos' impact was limited from an attacking standpoint, defensively they also were able to play a key role. For instance, when Arsenal were looking to press from the front, you would have Xhaka stepping out into the path of Ruben Neves to ensure that he couldn't dictate the tempo from deeper positions. But there were occasions where we saw Kolasinac and Mustafi tight on him, and you also saw Xhaka and Ceballos shift over to provide cover, and that was the successful manner in dealing with Traore's threat. And as good as Xhaka and Ceballos have been defensively, going forward, if you do give them time and space in and around that final third, they're able of playing those key defensive splitting passes. Ultimately, the real issue that Arsenal encounter in that 3-4-1-2 is in that number 10 role. While you can make the case that Lacazette is in that position to get him into the starting 11, what you can say is that he does a very good job with his back to goal, holding up the ball and linking play with his teammates, and he has the tactical discipline to apply pressure and limit the impact of the opposing side's deep-lying midfielder. But the issue here is that they don't have a link between midfield and attack. When teams look to press Xhaka and Ceballos, they're often in deeper positions, and although at times they're able to evade that press, there's often a huge gap between the midfield and the attack. This is a situation where a player like Bruno Fernandes does play a key role, because when he is stifled in between the lines and United can't get service into him, Bruno Fernandes simply drifts off into those wider positions to receive service, and then he's able to dictate play from those deeper positions due to his passing. And that was highlighted clearly in that North London derby against Jose Mourinho's Spurs. Spurs adopted more of a 4-4-2, and what you ended up seeing was that they didn't mind Xhaka and Ceballos getting on the ball in those deeper positions. They had a disjointed press through Kane and Son to try and force the Arsenal backline into mistakes, but Arsenal found it easy to bypass that press with Xhaka and Ceballos dropping off deeper to make it sometimes 4 or 5v2 in that zone, as the Spurs midfield weren't pushing forward as a unit. Now you have to ask yourself, why would Jose Mourinho want that to happen? Well, he knows that if Xhaka and Ceballos do get on the ball in those deeper positions, if he's able to stifle out Arsenal's key attacking players from their stationary positions, then Xhaka and Ceballos don't have the passing ability to shift the game. What you ended up seeing from Mourinho was that he looked to outnumber Arsenal's key attacking players in and around his zone. Technically, it should have been Lo Celso against Xhaka and Winks against Dani Ceballos in that midfield zone. And if one of the Spurs midfielders stepped out to their marker, the other would stick to Lacazette. And if they dropped off deeper, you would see Lo Celso and Winks in between Lacazette. But what you often saw from Mourinho's Spurs was that Winks would shift out towards the touchline to help out Ben Davies and Lucas Moura against Nicolas Pepe, ultimately creating a 1v3. And that would see Lo Celso shift out into the path of Lacazette to ensure that he wasn't the free man to get on the ball. That's how Spurs look to operate down their left-hand side. And when you shift over to the right, there was no real need for Lo Celso to shift out into that zone, because when Tierney pushed forward, Sissoko was dropping off a bit deeper, and if they needed Serge Aurier to push forward, then it would be a 1v2. And the reason why they were able to get away with that was due to Aubameyang's positioning. Aubameyang looked to present himself in that gap between Aurier and Davinson Sanchez, so that allowed Aurier to push forward to help out Sissoko and try to ensure that Tierney couldn't play passes or crosses into that zone. And Mourinho was comfortable with Davinson Sanchez's athleticism and strength to cope with Aubameyang if he looked to drift out into that left side of the pitch. Arsenal encountered a similar issue against the Aston Villa side that dropped off into a 4-1-4-1 that did force Arteta to bring on Xhaka at halftime, and you ended up seeing Arsenal shift to a 4-3-3. But even then, you ended up seeing Villa shift to a 4-4-2, and what they ended up doing was that they had Samatta and McGinn ahead of David Luiz, and what you ended up seeing from Arsenal was that that 4-3-3 was designed to have the fullbacks pushing forward, and then Ceballos and Xhaka occupying the half spaces. But even then, Arsenal failed to get grips of the game due to Villa's discipline. You would have Samata or McGinn on David Luiz, and then you would have the free player stepping out to Xhaka or Ceballos. And if you had Samata and McGinn pressing David Luiz and Ceballos, with Xhaka as the free man in that left half space zone, Trezeguet would step out to apply pressure, Douglas Luiz would shift into the path of Saka, and Gilbert would push out to the Arsenal fullback. So what you ended up seeing there was that Arsenal struggled to build through their midfield, and their attacking players in Nketiah, Lacazette, and Aubameyang did struggle to get on the ball. We eventually did see Arteta shift to more of a 4-2-4, but that didn't help their situation either. And once again, Arsenal encountered a similar issue that they did against Spurs. Villa weren't worried about Xhaka and Ceballos getting the ball in deeper positions because there was no link in between midfield and attack. So in that Arsenal setup, you had Nketiah, Pepe, Aubameyang, and Lacazette looking for service around the box, but Xhaka and Ceballos couldn't get the ball into them, and that once again is a prime example as to why Arsenal desperately need a number 10 in that zone or an additional ball-playing midfielder that's able to link midfield and attack with their passing. So as you can see, Dani Ceballos and Xhaka formed an effective partnership in Arsenal's 3-4-1-2 through their ability to provide defensive cover for their teammates, their pressing, and their ability to break up play to ensure that the opposing side's key players can't influence the game. And if you give them time and space on the ball, they are able to create chances and play their teammates in beyond the opposing side's defense. Ultimately, the issue that Arsenal do possess is based on what they don't have in comparison to what they do have. They don't have a player that can link play between midfield and attack, either in that number 10 role or in that midfield zone. And that's the issue that is ensuring that Arsenal can't take their game to the next level. While Dani Ceballos and Granit Xhaka have done a good job and ensured that Arsenal now are able to beat the bigger teams by playing this way, it's up against the smaller teams where Arsenal will have issues as those sides look to drop off a bit deeper, remain compact, and limit the space for Arsenal's attacking players to get on the ball. And while that is being placed on Xhaka and Ceballos, it's simply up to the Arsenal board to back Mikel Arteta and find a player in that mold to help the Gunners reach the next level. Hi everybody, thanks for watching, and subscribe here for your latest tactical analysis and daily commentary on the Interview show. And if that wasn't enough, don't forget you could find more organic, unfiltered soccer/football analysis on the Interviews podcast, the best soccer/football podcast in the world, available on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and any Android apps on your Android devices.